Hi teachers, my name is Sarah Smith. Welcome to Lead to Teach and welcome back to part 2 of Love the Kids, Love My Job. We're going to talk in this session, we're going to finish talking about how to use reinforcement in your elementary classroom. Remember that you can get guided notes at leadtoteach.com if you'd like something to accompany this session, but otherwise, let's jump in with a story about my little nephew Dawson. Dawson is heading into kindergarten this year and he was actually at my house earlier this week. And he was having a hard day. He had been at my house for a couple of hours and I said, okay, bud, we're gonna go to the park with your two sisters. It's time to get shoes on. No, I don't wanna get my shoes on. I don't wanna wear shoes. And I said, yeah, if you wanna go to the park, you have to wear shoes. And it was kind of a battle, but eventually we got to the park, we played for a while, and then I said, okay, it's time to get in the car, it's time to go home. No, I don't wanna leave, I wanna keep playing. And of course I reprimanded, no, it's time to go home. I said that it's time to get in the car. That means you need to listen the first time. He finally gets in the car. We finally get home and I say, okay, it's time to wash hands so that we can have a snack. No, I don't want to wash my hands. My hands aren't dirty. And I say, yeah, if you've been at the park, it means hands are dirty. So if you want to have a snack, right? I fall into threatening so easily. If you want to have a snack, it means washing your hands. Oh, I don't want to. And eventually we get the hands washed and then he starts eating his snack at the table. And what does he do while he's eating his snack but gets up and starts walking away from the table with string cheese in hand? And I say, Dawson, guess what? I need you to stay in the kitchen with your snack. If you want to eat your snack, you have to stay at the table. But no, I can be very careful. I'll be very careful in this room. Nope, that's not a choice. And I realized after a couple of hours of this that I was super frustrated and he was super frustrated. And it hits me like, Sarah, you know better. What are you doing? So I decide that I'm going to set up a situation where I know he will be more compliant. And I decide I'm going to turn the tables. And I ask him, Dawson, I need help bringing the Legos upstairs, but they're kind of heavy for me. Are you strong enough that you could help me? Could you carry them for me? And he kind of smiles. Okay. And I gasped and I said, oh, what did you say? And he kind of looks at me and says, okay. And I said, I didn't know you knew how to say okay. And he kind of smiles and he says, yeah, I always knew that. I say, okay. So we start playing with Legos and I'm asking him to comply with really simple requests that I know he'll comply with. Dawson, will you hand me the red Lego that's by your leg? And every time he says, okay, I react enthusiastically. What? You said okay again? What are you, the okay kid? And he's giggling and he's complying. And then toward the end of our time with Legos, I say, okay, I'm gonna ask you to do something, but it's really tricky and I'm gonna see if you still know how to say okay. And he looks at me and he says, okay. And I say, Dawson, it's time to clean up the Legos. And what does he do but smiles, big smile, and says, okay. And I said, what? You said it again? And he helps me clean up the Legos. And we put the Legos away, and it's not that we lived happily ever after, but it was a good reminder for me that kids always respond better to praise and to positive interactions than they do to penalties and punitive interactions, which is what we want to talk about today. Okay, do you remember this? We said that if you want to maintain an expectation, it has to be supported by feedback, affirmative and corrective as needed. So we're going to stay just in the affirmative realm today. Corrective is next time. But I want you to recall, if you will, that reinforcement is comprised of 4 categories. Non-contingent, I give you approval, attention, affection just because you are. You haven't done anything to earn it. Non-vocal, I use body language or physical contact to convey approval, attention, love. And then vocal and tangible. And what I want to do today is talk about how you can reinforce behaviors vocally and tangibly in order to maximize your effectiveness as a teacher. Okay, so let's start by defining vocal reinforcement. Vocal reinforcement is attention or recognition given to students through spoken language. Another way of thinking about that is calling it praise. We're just talking about praise. And I want to start by talking about the why of praise. Why is praise so important? The research tells us that praise is perhaps the simplest, but also most well-researched strategy for reinforcing appropriate behavior. There is more research behind praise than any other category in behavior management. Students who are specifically praised show an increase in, are you ready for this? This is wild. An increase in Motivation to learn. I want to learn what it is you're teaching me. On-task behavior. I will persist with the tasks you give me. Work productivity and accuracy. So not only will I produce more work, but it will be more correct than if I'm not praised. Compliance. I will follow directions the first time. Cooperative peer behavior. I get along better with the kids around me. And overall desirable academic and social behavior. What? All of that just because as a teacher, I'm willing to praise and I'm using my praise effectively. All of these outcomes are possible. And here's the cool part is that this is researched by thousands of studies. Of course, this is just a sampling of them, but what I want you to notice is that the research goes back as far as the 1960s up to 2020. Decades of research supporting how important and valuable and effective praise is in shaping student behavior. Okay, so that being the case, then let's talk about how then do you use it. Top 3 praise must-haves in order to be effective is that praise needs to be genuine, it needs to be specific, and it needs to be given immediately, which we'll talk about a little more closely. Okay, when I say praise needs to be genuine, what it means is that you express approval of students in a sincere manner. And that might seem sort of obvious. You might say, well, duh, Sarah, of course you give praise in a sincere manner. But let me tell you why I say this. Because I so often hear teachers who give praise as a reprimand. If it's genuine, it's not given as a reprimand, and I'm going to talk to kids, not about kids. So I often hear teachers say something like, wow, I sure like how quietly Sophie is standing. And you can tell by their tone and by their facial expression that what they really mean is they wish everybody would stand the way Sophie is standing. If that's what you want, then just say that. I need everyone to stand the way Sophie is standing. But if you're going to praise her, then do it sincerely and talk to her, not about her. Sophie, I sure love the way you're standing, little lady. Thank you very much. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about genuine. Specific. When we say praise needs to be specific, what it means is noting or describing exactly what students are doing well. In the research, you might see this called narrating compliance. I'm going to describe the behavior that I see being done well as it relates to an expectation, but without being too lengthy. So what that means is, let's just use transitions as an example. Very often, the 2 behaviors teachers want during a transition is you go quickly and you go quietly. If that's my expectation during a transition, then that's what I'm going to praise during the transition. So I ask kids to quietly line up by the door so that we can leave for PE. And I'm going to then praise kids who are doing that quickly and quietly because that was the expectation I stated. Brandon, wow, super job going quietly. Thank you, Cole. Hands are to yourself. Love it. Lily, super job going quietly, little lady. Thank you very much. And I'm giving that specific praise, but I don't want to be too lengthy because I don't want the kids to be frustrated by how much time I spend praising. So I don't praise every single kid for every single task, but I praise them enough that they know that's how they get my attention, is by doing what's right, not by doing what's wrong. And I'm going to say something that may not be very popular. It would also be okay to sometimes give general praise or generic praise. If we always give specific or descriptive praise statements, it can cause students to become fatigued by our praise. So sometimes it is okay, especially during the flow of a lesson, just to give a thumbs up and say, nice job, guys. Or, yep, thank you, and move on. Okay, here's what research tells us. Specific praise is a higher quality of praise because it communicates teacher expectations to students while also promoting successful student behaviors. In other words, when I specifically praise, I get a double whammy outcome. First of all, that I'm building that relationship with my kids, right, and reinforcing their appropriate behavior. But I'm also restating my expectations. When I say, wow, Cole, super job keeping your hands to yourself, it reminds everyone, oh yeah, we're supposed to be keeping our hands to ourselves. Okay, so we know that praise needs to be genuine, it needs to be specific. The third component of effective praise would be that it needs to be given immediately, which is, I'm going to say, using a 0-second delay between when an expectation is stated and when students are vocally recognized for meeting it. when I say quickly, another way of thinking about that is to say you're going to catch them being good. And I'm going to say this one more time because it's so important, using a 0-second delay. So let me tell you a quick anecdote related to this. I was in a classroom just a few months ago where this little boy was having a hard time staying in seat doing his work. And so the teacher with whom I was working said that she wanted to help him stay in seat by increasing praise around sitting behavior. And I said, okay, then let me help you with that. And if I see him sitting and you haven't yet noticed, I will point to him and I'll give you a thumbs up so that you can praise him, right? Because we know teacher praise would be more powerful than my praise as the coach. And she says, okay, so we come in from recess. He has a hard time sitting down and getting started on the math task, but he finally sits down, he's finally working, and the teacher is standing across the room. So I wave my arms to get her attention and I point at him and give the thumbs up, like, look, he's doing it, he's working. And she nods that she's understood what I'm saying, and she starts to make her way over to him, but she stops at 2 different seats on the way there to give feedback and help to other kids. And by the time she gets to this kiddo, guess what's happened? He is flopped out of chair and is now reprimanded for not being on task. So when I say quickly catch them being good, I mean you get there as quickly as you can, even if you have to say from across the room, Johnny, super job. I'm coming to you, dude. That looks perfect. And do something to catch those kids being good, especially if it's a difficult kid. Okay, so I want to show you a couple clips of kids taking whiteboards out. And I want you just to notice how many seconds pass between the expectation being stated and the praise being delivered. Would you just notice that? That's not right. And I'm watching for which kids quietly have a whiteboard marker. Oh, Lillian, super fast. Cole, you're taking it out quietly. Natalie, already ready. Sabrina, super fast. Holy moly. And Alexa, Layton. Woo! Can't believe I'm adding another point, but I think I need to because so many kids did that quickly. Okay, on your whiteboard. Made. Erase, erase. I'm watching for kids that quietly have a cap on their marker. Oh, Ethan, super fast dude. London going super quickly. Are my girls already done? Oh. Holy cow. I'm adding one for how quickly you did it and one for how quietly you did it. Holy cow. Okay, here's what I want to do. Okay, did you notice how many seconds passed between the expectation and the praise? And it was about 0 to 2, right? I know I'm not exactly following my 0-second delay rule, but I'm certainly not going to go beyond this 0 to 2 second time frame if I want my praise to be effective. I heard a teacher say it this way at one point. She said, in my mind, I've just started thinking of it like this. Effective teachers don't state and wait. And I was like, oh, I love that. I love that so much, not just because it rhymes, but because it's so true. Effective teachers don't just state an expectation and then fold their arms and wait to see who complies and who doesn't. Because I'll tell you what, if you do that, you're going to have a lot more kids who non-comply than comply. So if that helps you to remember it that way, I love that approach. You don't state and wait if you want to be effective. Okay, a question teachers often ask is, how often should I praise my students? At what ratio? You may have heard the number 4 to 1, that you should be praising 4 times as often as you're correcting. It turns out that was just a number that was arbitrarily tried once and they saw impact. So that's the number that began being tossed around. But thank you, Paul Caldarella, for doing a study to see what number does it actually need to be to show impact. And guess what he found? 2 to 1. Do you love that? I love that. That feels so much easier to me. In other words, I need to praise or affirm twice as often as I correct. And it doesn't mean that you have to give 2 praise statements before you can give a corrective statement. If you need to correct, just correct. But it does mean that overall, I'm twice as often affirmative as corrective. Okay, so in summary, we're going to say effective praise is offered genuinely. I'm sincere when I offer it. Stated specifically, I describe for students exactly what they're doing well as it relates to my expectation, and it's delivered immediately after the expectation is stated, within 0 to 2 seconds. Good, good, okay. Let's move on then to tangible reinforcement, our last category of reinforcement. Tangible reinforcement is attention or recognition given to students through visible or tactile means. And I don't necessarily mean that it's something that you have to be able to hand to the kids and they can hold, but it needs to be something they could see or that could be touched, like a point on the board or a token or something. Okay, let me tell you, my first year teaching first grade, here's what I believed. I believed that my first graders should be good for the sake of wanting to be good. I believed that I shouldn't have to reward them for behaviors they should be exhibiting anyway. And in my mind, I would have a class of Hermione Grangers just because that's what they should do and because that's what I wanted and expected. And unfortunately, it didn't happen, no matter how much maybe they should be good because they should be good. It just didn't happen. I had a classroom full of Draco Malfoys, way more than Hermione Grangers. It just was totally ineffective. So my second year, here's what I did differently. I had a pepperoni pizza up front near our desk area and then in the back of the classroom near my rug area. And all the kids had to do in order to earn a pepperoni was follow my directions the first time, right? Because that's such a beautiful umbrella rule. And if they followed my directions the first time, they got a pepperoni in either setting. And as soon as both pizzas were filled, 25 pepperonis here, 25 there, we got to have a pizza party. And I could not believe the difference. I couldn't believe how much more motivated kids were to follow my directions and how much happier they were and how much calmer I felt. It was just glorious. However, I don't really recommend this system to teachers with whom I work because it's kind of time intensive to make the pizzas and we have so many kids with gluten and dairy allergies. Here's what I mostly recommend now is a tally system that has both a short-term and a long-term component. So what I mean by that is I'm giving the kids tallies for following my directions the first time, or really for following any of our classroom expectations, right? And as soon as they get 10 tallies, they earn a letter toward the word party. Nice job, you guys already got 10 tallies. You're so good at following directions. I'm giving you the letter P. So that would be the short-term component of it, is earning the letters. When they earn all the letters, that's the long-term component because that's now when we get to actually have a party. And I'll talk in a little bit about what that might look like, but this is what I mostly recommend now. I have seen teachers who use 10 frames and magnets, and I maybe even like that better if I'm being honest, because then you don't have to take the cap off the marker and draw on the board and erase anything. Like all they're doing is moving the magnet up into place in the 10 frame. I love that. Tweak it how you need to, adapt it how you need to, but the idea is that kids might be more successful if there's a short-term and a long-term component. Much like we get grades every semester, that would be a short-term, maybe reinforcement, right? And then we get a degree at the end of our time in school. So that would be the long-term reinforcement. Okay, so if you're going to use a reward system, and I strongly recommend that you do, here are top 10 must-haves in order for it to be effective, in order for it to work for you and your kids. So I want you to notice as we go through this that these components describe why the tally system I just showed you would work. And they're also going to describe why the marble jar approach might be ineffective. So this is probably the most common reward system I see teachers use. And I think it's because it's so cute and it's so easy to implement, but it's also pretty ineffective. So be thinking, why would filling a jar with individual marbles maybe not be effective compared to something like a tally system? Okay, ready? Number 10 of our components required for an effective reward system is that the system needs to be easily visible to all students. No matter where you sit in the classroom, you can see the reward system. So typically that means kind of front and center on our whiteboard or off to one side or the other, but everybody can see it no matter where they're sitting. Much like we as Americans love to see the scoreboard no matter where we're sitting in a stadium or an arena. We need visibility. Okay, number 9 is that the system needs to be countable for students. I need to know how many points I have and how many more points I need before I access reinforcement. I'm going back to my sports analogy, kind of like in sports, we'd like to know how many points we have and how many more points we need to catch up, or how many more points we need in order to win. As human beings, we like to know our standing. We like to know our status. So give that to your kids for free without making them guess where they're at and how many more they need. Okay, number 8, system needs to be displayed by the class. Rules. Have you ever had this experience where you go to a store and you think you want to buy something, but you can't find a price tag and you're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to buy it because I don't know how much it costs. The same is true for our kids. They like to know what expectations they have to meet in order to receive this tally or this token or this magnet, whatever it is. In order to access reinforcement, what is it I have to do? How do I get there? Number 7 is that the system needs to be easy for the teacher to access while teaching. Let me tell you why I have this picture here. I set a goal a couple of summers ago to drink more water. And I was at my sister's house and I had a large cup of ice water next to me, but the arm of the chair was so high that every time I went to reach over it, it was kind of effortful to reach over and grab it. And then because of how I was reaching, I had to grab the top of the cup, which was top heavy, and it was just effortful. And I wasn't drinking nearly enough water. So I made a structural change and I set my water on a hard surface on a book. And not only did I realize that then it was in my peripheral vision, but it was so much easier to pick up from the bottom and grab a drink as well. And I started meeting my daily water goal just by that simple change. So the system needs to be easy for the teacher to access so that he or she doesn't find it too effortful to give points. I'll tell you just kind of briefly, a teacher I saw once who did put her reward system on the board. She moved it from the back of the classroom to the front of the classroom. But it was so high up and it was in such a far corner that every time she wanted to give the students a point, she had to stand on tiptoe and reach clear up to mark the point. Because of that, she wasn't giving the kids the points they deserved because it was effortful. So make sure it's easy for you to access. Okay, number 6. Sixth component of an effective reward system is that points are given in combination with specific praise. I talked about how sometimes you can just get away with general praise during instruction. Never, never, never would we do that when giving points. This is our richest praise. It should always be attached to specificity. Have you ever had the experience where you get a deposit in your bank account and you don't know what the deposit is for? Maybe because the bank description is unclear or whatever the reason, but it's frustrating. So we always want to tell kids why they're getting the point. Why have they just earned that? Especially because that will help them to continue doing it, right? Okay, number 5 on our list is that praise should be tied to the behavior, not the reward. I think about my teenage daughter and I think how detrimental it would be if I were to constantly praise only her exterior features. Oh, your hair is so pretty and look at your beautiful smile and you have the longest eyelashes. It wouldn't be long before that's what she began to obsess over, right? As a mom, I know better. I'm not doing that. I'm saying things like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for helping me. Or you are so good with kids. You are going to be such a good mom someday. Or oh, seriously, you are so thoughtful. I'm trying to increase those internal traits and qualities that I know will help her for the rest of her life. So we do the same thing with praise where we say things like, oh my goodness, second graders, you lined up so quickly. You are so good at following directions. Thank you. As opposed to, okay, I have my marker. I'm waiting to give a point. I'm seeing if I can give a point. Let me see who's going quietly. Let me see. I'm watching. Can I give a point? I'm waiting to see. Can I give a point? And if we focus all of our language on the reward, then that's what students become concerned about is the reward. And they don't begin to view themselves as intrinsically motivated to follow expectations, to follow rules or meet expectations. So quick tip, this is how you increase intrinsic motivation is by tying your language to the behavior and not to the reward. Did you know that? It's as simple as that. It's not a matter of abstaining from reward systems like I tried to do my first year. It's a matter of tying your language to their behavior and not to, wow, you guys are just working so hard for this point. You guys are so excited for this party. Tie your language to the behavior. Okay, number 4 on our list of components of an effective reward system is that points are given throughout a lesson versus at the end. I think about as I taught my daughter to drive, how silly it would have been if I had waited until we got home to say, okay, do you remember how when we pulled out onto Main Street, you looked both ways before you turned? That was really good. And do you remember how when we approached 1400 North, you slowed down really carefully. That was perfect. I loved how you did that. Not only am I not going to remember everything she did well, but neither is she. That's not going to improve her behavior in the moment. So the same is true in our classroom, that we give points throughout a lesson instead of waiting until the end to say, okay, let's talk about how many points you earned for that lesson. Number 3 on our list is that students know what the reward will be ahead of time. And I know how unpopular that sounds. I know it is so fun to tell students that you're going to give them a mystery motivator. But the research doesn't really support it. The research says that we always tell kids what they're working for, because then even if they don't like it, they can plan accordingly. To me, this is kind of like my salary. Even if I don't like my salary, even if I wish it were more, at least I can budget accordingly if I know what's coming my way. I saw a little boy once who was working for a mystery motivator, and it ended up, after all of this work had been done, that he got a Tootsie Roll, and he completely freaked out and melted down because he didn't like Tootsie Rolls. And what happened is then he was reprimanded for his behavior when he reacted to the Tootsie Roll. So we always tell students what the reward will be ahead of time, and we build up excitement by our language. You guys, after we get all of our points, we're going to have a popcorn party, and my class last year loved popcorn parties. This is going to be so fun. You're going to love this. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Sarah, you just barely said like we focus on the behavior, not the reward, right? But I'm saying you still build excitement about the reward as you initially tell them what it is. And then as you work toward that reward, you're tying your language to the behavior. Okay, quick tip. I would suggest you don't let students vote on what the reward will be. Unless, of course, you want to create division, then by all means. But I've seen teachers sometimes who say something like, okay, raise your hand if you want a pajama party, raise your hand if you want extra recess, and invariably what happens is the losing side feels deflated and they're upset that their vote didn't count enough to work for the reward they wanted. So I would, as the teacher, choose the reward and convey excitement and enthusiasm for it by how I talked about it, not let the students vote on it. Okay. Number 2, ready, is that points are only rarely removed. Teachers often ask, well, can I ever erase points or take tokens away? You can, but you would want to do it for group infractions. In other words, I'm not just taking away a point because a single student did something and is thereby sabotaging the group. And you'd want to do it after a vocal correction had been given. So if both of those criteria have been met, yeah, then you can take away a point, but that would be the exception and not the rule. It's kind of like my retirement account. I deposit. It's only in really unique circumstances that I could touch that money. It's kind of the same idea with points. Okay, then number 1, the most important component of an effective reward system, numero uno, is deadlines are never imposed, ever. And I think about when I had my daughter, I was due in the middle of my final semester of school in my undergraduate program. And I think how awful it would have been if the university had said to me, well, we're sorry. You need to graduate on time. So all of those previous semesters, those previous credits, those hours and hours and hours of work just don't count. I would have shut down. It would have been too much to start over. Luckily, they let me finish the next semester and I graduated in the spring, and all of those credits I had previously acquired just followed me into that semester. We want to take the same approach with our kids, that we don't impose a deadline. It's just when they earn it, and we're going to deliver the reward at that point. Okay, I want to go through, now that we know top 10 components of an effective reward system, I want to go through some questions teachers really commonly ask after hearing about this. Here's the first one. Teachers say, well, but if there aren't any deadlines, then how often are you supposed to reward the behavior? And the answer initially is a lot. Because we want to train kids that, yeah, this system will work for you. If you work for it, it will be worth it. You'll see how quickly this system works for you. So I want to show you a video, first day of first grade. And I just want you to notice, if you will, how many pepperonis the students have earned within the first 7 minutes of this first day of school. Would you just notice how many pepperonis have they already earned first day of school? Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are our classroom rules. Will you say classroom rules? Classroom rules. We have 3. Congratulations, you're already doing the first one. I'm going to put it right here in the middle. Our first rule in our classroom, the one that's so important more than anything else, is that you follow directions the first time. And every time I do that with my finger, it means I don't have to tell you 2 times. I don't have to tell you 3 times or 5 times or 99 times. It means when I say it, you do it. So I'll start and I'm going to say follow directions, and I want you to go first time. Okay, I'll start. Follow directions the first time. Woo! Okay, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm adding another pepperoni. Because everybody did that right with me. Holy cow. Okay, so we're going to practice and see in my class who's good at following directions the first time. Here's your direction. I want you to wave at your teacher. Put your hands back. Quietly open your mouth. Close your mouth. Raise one hand in the air. Raise 2 hands in the air. Put both hands down. And I didn't even tell you to do it quietly, and you still did. That's amazing. Okay, let's see if you can do something harder. Without talking, stand up. Ashlyn's standing up. Good. JD's standing up. Trevor. Hallie standing up. Tate. Gabe. Without talking, sit down. Brooklyn went right back to power position. I didn't even tell her to. That was perfect. Wyatt, were you in power position too? Love it. And Claire? Okay. Great, following directions. Okay, did you notice it was 4? Which means they're earning a pepperoni every 2 minutes. Wow, which means that they are going to have a party within the first 3 to 4 days of starting this system, right? See, I did the work, I got the paycheck. Wow, okay, this really is worth it. I'm going to continue making efforts toward following directions or meeting class expectations. Here's another question teachers often ask is, well, what does the party look like? Because I don't have a lot of money and I don't have a lot of time to set up a class store, and if I can't plan for, having it at the end of September, then what is this supposed to look like? I can't just throw together a really elaborate party. Right, true. No, you can't. So the answer is you don't need to do that. Here's my favorite reward for kids earning a party is a bowl of popcorn and a read aloud. And I even ask parents to purchase the popcorn, and they typically just go to a local store and buy the giant bags of popcorn that are already popped, and I have them bring it into the classroom and they fill up little bowls or little cups, pick your poison, and hand it out to the kids while I'm doing a read aloud. I've seen other teachers who show a couple like YouTube videos, like kid snippets videos or Mystery Doug videos, something like that. But the idea is that this is super low prep, high impact, right? It does not need to be a class store in order to be effective. Here's the question teachers then ask. Well, I can't sustain having a party every 3 to 4 days, even if it is as simple as popcorn. That's unrealistic. So then what do I do? And the answer, of course, is that you want to fade the frequency of reinforcement. First time we have a party, it's going to happen within 3 to 4 days. After that, it might be 1 to 2 weeks. After that, I might begin giving reinforcement to the point that we don't earn a party for 3 to 4 weeks. And after that, the rest of the year, it might fall about once a month-ish. Kind of like when I first taught my daughter to drive, I was praising every single time she parked. Boy, we were hitting that so hard because it was a new skill. But at this point now, she doesn't need that much reinforcement. I can every so often maybe say something like, wow, nice parking job. And she's like, ooh, thanks. And that's enough. So then teachers say, well, wait a minute though, I thought I wasn't supposed to impose deadlines on earning anything. So if you're telling me that this is about when they should be earning it, doesn't that violate your no deadlines rule? Yep, that would be right. You know the timeline, they don't. In your head, you have that timeline in mind, like, okay, I'm going for about the first 3 or 4 days, then about a week more, and then another few weeks. But you're not telling that to them. You're fading it without them knowing that's what you're doing. In their mind, they should be thinking something along the lines of, we don't need constant reinforcement. This is just how our classroom works, right? This is the water in which we swim, the lens through which we see. And then the teachers ask, well, but I don't have time during a lesson to give a party, so when am I having this party that you're talking about? And the answer would be at a strategic time. The reason I have a lightning bolt here is because I always think I'm probably going to be struck by lightning someday for being so strategic with when I would award class parties. Oh my goodness, look, you guys earned your last tally right before recess, or you earned your last point right before the end of the day. Holy cow, I can't believe this happened so conveniently. And here's the mom already here ready to distribute popcorn. I will give you a quick tip about this. The more immediately you reinforce your students' behavior, the more likely it is to continue. I often see teachers who will give students their last point at 9 a.m. in the morning and then say, okay, so today, before school gets out at 3 p.m., we're going to have a party. And now you've got 7 hours, a 7-hour lag between when reinforcement should have been when it was earned and when it's delivered. And that tends to create shutdown. It tends to create kids who are not as motivated by the system. So that's why you have to be strategic about when you're giving those final points so that it falls at a time when you can immediately reinforce behavior. Another question teachers ask is, but what do I do about behavior when my kids are at the rug area? And the answer is, you still use the same system, right? I'm still giving tallies for meeting class expectations or putting up points, whatever, but you're only spelling a single word. So in other words, I don't have the word party back there and the word party up at the board. I just have one word party, and when we get 10 points in either setting, we earn a letter toward the single word. By the way, I'm sure you've already thought through this, but of course you wouldn't have to do the word party, right? I saw a kinder teacher once who had her kids spell popcorn, and as the year went on, they just had to earn more and more letters within popcorn. So like the beginning of the year, they only had to earn the letters in pop, and she already had corn filled in. And then as the year progressed and they got better and better at it, finally by the end of the year, they were earning all the letters in popcorn. It was kind of cute. Okay, final review. Ready? How much do you remember about what an effective reward system entails? Especially since we've now just talked about all these questions that come up after you hear about effective reward systems. Number 10, reward system should be easily visible, which is marble jar, strike one. Even if it is in the front of the classroom, it is not easy for every kid to see no matter where they're sitting. Number 9, remember, it should be accessible for the teacher. Number 8, it should be countable for the students, which is marble jar, strike 2, and it's already out because I can't count how many I have or how many more I need before I access reinforcement. Number 7 is that it should be displayed next to the class rules, whatever system we use, displayed next to the expectations. Number 6 is that we give it with what type of praise? Do you remember? Specific praise. Number 5, we said praise should be tied to blank, not the reward. I'm not constantly talking about the reward. I'm talking about the student's behavior, thereby creating and increasing intrinsic motivation. My points are given throughout a task versus at the end of it. Number 3, the reward is known. I'm not making my kids guess what they're working for. Number 2, points are only rarely removed. That's the exception, not the rule. And number 1, I hope you remember this one, is that the reward does not depend on a deadline, right? I'm never, ever, ever imposing a deadline. When you earn it, and it's yours. Okay. Also included in the notes are whole group reward ideas. Some teachers don't like to do popcorn parties and read alouds, so I have a list of other ideas that I've seen work in other teachers' classrooms. And then I'm not a huge fan of small groups because I feel like you can get away with whole group rewards if you're intentional and careful about it. But I did include some small group reward guidelines in case you do want to use small groups. Okay. Final question then, as always, is what did you like or learn about using praise or reward systems? And for me, something I've realized both as a teacher and as an instructional coach is that teaching is hard. It doesn't matter how you shake it out. It's very complex and it requires energy. Your energy can be used either positively or negatively. I would choose positive every time for my sake and for their sake. I'm going to devote my energy toward using praise and all 4 types of reinforcement as much as I can for all of us to be happy. Okay, that's it. See you next time.